Good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. What night is it? It is Monday night, and it is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. We are so delighted that you guys are here with us on this evening to learn that health is wealth. As always, we're going to go around and we're going to introduce our esteemed panel that's here with us on this evening as we begin our conversation, starting with Dr. 100, our community doctor that gets it done, aka Dr. Maya Green, known as Dr. 100. Dr. 100.
Hello, I'm so glad to be back amongst colleagues, amongst family, amongst friends. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Congressman Davis, for creating this platform. I'm ready to get into learning from community and from my colleagues here. Glad to be back. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much to our colleague and co-worker and friend who usually leaves us when it gets blistery cold in Chicago and goes and have fun in the sun. That's our very own Dr. Douglas Graham. Dr. Graham.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm a retired physician. I spent 30 years working in the western suburbs and 2 additional years in the representative's office. It was just an awesome experience. I'm trying to answer your questions if I can, and it's an honor to be here.
Thank you so very much. I want to say hey to Yolanda Williams, who has popped in, and she's saying good evening to everyone. To the urologist of the stars, who never wants accolades, but he always gets the job done. And just want to remind you guys to listen to him on every Sunday morning. That's our very own Dr. Terry Mason. Dr. Mason.
Thank you, Nikki, for the introduction, and thank you, Congressman and Nikki, for putting the platform together. And I'm always glad to be with my esteemed colleagues to try and answer questions that people may ask us. I am a happily retired urologist after nearly 30 years. And the show you referred to is my radio show that is now my 32nd year on WBON.
Good.
AM 1690, the doctor in the house. That's me.
Outstanding. Jack Lynch and Gift of Hope is here, and they're saying good evening to the team, to the baby doctor, that internal medicine and pediatrician that makes sure all of your kids are on target. And she also is a wealth of information. My good friend, our very own Dr. Sylvia Robinson. Dr. Robinson.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Danny K. Davis, for allowing this, and also our hostess with the mostest, Nikki, for helping us moderate through. I'm happy to be here and happy to learn as well as impart the knowledge that I have this evening.
Yes.
Thank you so very much to that great dad of 5 daughters who gets the job done, and I don't know how he does it every day. However, he cooks and cleans, so we hear. That's our very own Dr. Pete. Dr. Bonnie Pete Thomas, how are you?
Nikki, it is a pleasure to be here. Thankful for Congressman Davis and yourself for creating this platform. Looking forward to communicating with the community and see how we can inform each other. I'm happy to be here with my colleagues also.
Outstanding. I want to say hey to Val Talley, who's here with us. He says good evening to everyone. To our guest tonight, who is the chair of the health committee for the NAACP. That's our very own Miss Newkirk, who's here with us, hanging out on this evening, who actually works out 5 days a week. Wish I could do that, but she loves to actually cook with her daughter. So Dr. Mason, I know you would love to hear that, because she's cooking every day with her daughter. Come on, Miss Newkirk.
Hello, everyone. I am grateful to be here amongst these amazing doctors and joined by, of course, Congressman Davis. And thank you, Nikki, for having me. I'm Tarina Newkirk again, third vice president and health committee chair for the Chicago West Side branch of the NAACP. I also have a background in public health and social services, so I'm excited to be in the space with all of you today.
Thank you so very much. I want to say hey to Linda Johnson, who's here with us. She's saying good evening to everyone. Thank you, Linda, for dropping on by. I do want to remind everyone to share again, and continue to hit those likes and stars buttons. We love when we see those. To the art connoisseur, who's very bashful and says that he's just a guy here with us, but we all know that Joe Harrington is a star. Our very own Joe Harrington. Joe?
Good evening, Nikki, and good evening to my esteemed colleagues. It's good to be back again. Hopefully, it's going to be a great conversation. Most of my career has been spent in public health and healthcare. Worked at 3 different hospitals and had the honor to work with Dr. Mason as an assistant commissioner, Chicago Department of Public Health. Left there and worked for the Illinois Department of Public Health, where I was the regional health officer for Cook County and an administrative law judge.
Outstanding. Well, to the guy who flies back and forth all the time from Chicago to DC, making sure that legislation does what it do, to the one who makes this platform available for us, and to the one who teaches us each and every day that health is wealth, our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, Danny K. Davis. Congressman Davis?
Well, let me thank all of you for being present, accounted for, and with us. I've had a pretty interesting health day already because I had a visit from Dr. Eric Whitaker and two of his colleagues from Zing Healthcare. And I was so excited because I think what he and they are doing is a prime example of what happens when you have faith and you take a shot at doing something that you think can be done. Eric informed me that they now have 182 employees. And I remember just 3-4 years ago when he was talking about developing Zing Healthcare. And he and Dr. Martin were here this afternoon. They were visiting. And then, of course, tomorrow is the day that the Ways and Means Committee will have a meeting with the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And I might ask you at some point, we go around the table in terms of questioning witnesses. And so I'll get my 5 minutes or 3 minutes, whichever it is. And if anybody have something that they think I ought to be asking the secretary on tomorrow when we meet, please let me know, and I'll try and see if I can fit that into my 5 minutes and get some response. But that's kind of the way democracy. Interesting thing, they're about 40, well, they're 25 and 18, there are 43, 44 members of that committee. And the one thing that is pretty much guaranteed when we have a hearing is that every member of the committee will get an opportunity to ask a question and will have 5 minutes generally to engage with whoever and whatever. And so I'm always amazed when I go to community meetings and people want to hurry up and get finished, hurry up and get through. and one of the things that you learn when you're part of a body that's 435 people, and each one gets some opportunity to comment or be engaged, to have a question answered relative to what you are attempting to do. So let me thank you all. Of course, we also have big stuff going on in Chicago. And anytime there is a major election in Chicago, that's a big deal. Third largest city in the United States of America. Billions and billions and billions of dollars will be spent and determined by this government unit and what will take place. So it's good to have you all. It's good to be with you all. Thank you very much. And first of all, shall transcend all. And why don't we get started?
Sure thing. Want to say hey to Angela Taylor, who's here. She's saying hi to everyone. To Nellie Purnell King, who's here, and she's saying good evening once again. And so is Jack Lynch. She's saying evening once again to everyone here. Well, we had a great, robust conversation earlier today about childhood development. It was an outstanding Zoom that we had. And after that conversation, Dr. Mason kind of shared some additional thoughts that he had in reference to the robust conversation that was happening. And Dr. Mason, I would like for you to continue to share that on this evening.
Well, I mean, Nikki, thank you very much. And what I'm going to say is, with some comments that Nikki and I were talking about, as we talk about our children and we talk about some of the challenges that we see today. And Congressman, to your point, I had a lot of those conversations with Eric uh, and Zing, but even more, one of the other organizations that Eric is working with and always trying to pour back into the community is with an organization called CPAS. And CPAS stands for Creating Pathways for Academic Student Success. And we're trying to do that to increase the pool of people who will be ready to enter into medical careers. The issues are many in terms of making sure that we have an opportunity for any student that gets through this sort of educational maze. But there are a number of things that get in the way of our students being as successful as we would like to see them be. Not the least of which, I just had a call the other day about the food. In fact, when I was on my radio show on WVON this past Sunday, people called in and asked about the food in the school. I referred them to their local school council and their alderman, but they were concerned about the quality of food that's being served in their schools. And so they need, and we talked about it, and there is a big disparity in the quality of food that is served in the schools. And I can tell you that based on our involvement on working with that when we're passing the good food purchasing ordinance back up in at the county. But more importantly, when we were looking at different issues in the different schools, and the schools where people are very well resourced, tuitions is usually pretty high. It's very private. Those schools have menus that have organic opportunities for the students. It has fresh fruits, fresh vegetables for every single student, and I'm disappointed of when we start looking at what's being offered oftentimes to our children in Chicago public school systems and that disparity. Now, I understand why it happens, but we really need to do a better job because we've got to make sure that the schools do as good a job as they can providing good food, but at the same time, we need to be certain that that's being reinforced at home with the same kind of quality foods because the kids won't eat, if they haven't had what this food is, and they're not getting it at home, and unfortunately, too many of our meals are prepared outside of our home and fast food restaurants for any number of reasons, and I'm not blaming anyone. And I'm going to put in a plug here for increasing breastfeeding rates as well, because our breastfeeding rates are not where they need to be. And Congressman, I'm going to stop at this point that when I was at the Chicago Department of Public Health, even introduced and would probably like to reintroduce legislation to make certain that employers provide not a bathroom, but a decent place for women to go and pump the milk from the breast. I understood this because when my daughter was pregnant, and she was going through that, and it was difficult. And we need to make it better for women to make certain that they can give their child the very food that nature has created for that child. And not formula, but the milk that's tailor-made for that baby. So there were a lot of issues that Nikki and I discussed, and not the least of them were some of the issues around just the changes in the way that things are being done in our community compared to the way they used to be, in terms of our communities being what they used to be, and that is a family. And everybody in that family had input into that child. And I'm grateful that I had that opportunity growing up in Inglewood. So I'll stop right there. Nikki, I think I tried to go as quickly as I could the thumbnail of what we talked about.
Well, let me just say to you, Doctor, that, we had an exposition at the University of Illinois a few weeks ago, and we have a group called Inventors Group. Many of them brought things they had invented. And one of the individuals had brought an invention she has created that will allow women who would like to nurse their babies and still be engaged in other activity, like attending meetings or whatever. And they've got a contraption this lady had created, and they can do it privately without exposing themselves. And you know, I might bring her on one day because she got this creation, and I was fascinated by it, as well as the fellow who had invented a fork where people who've had a stroke might be able to feed themselves because the fork is made in such a way you can slip it onto your finger, and it might take the person a little bit longer to eat, but when they are recovering from a stroke, it's some fascinating stuff going on. I mean, I was totally blown away with some of the creative things that people have come up with that can aid in healthcare and aid individuals who are recovering from certain illnesses. So very interesting stuff.
Well, Miss Newkirk, it looks like you want to say something. You have this look, so just jump on in and start talking and sharing.
Yes, I just wanted to contribute to some of the conversation that Dr. Mason presented around challenges that women face with breastfeeding. And I wanted to present another challenge, which is that women who don't work corporate jobs don't often have built-in supports for them to allow them to take pauses throughout their day or even work in a traditional corporate office or a facility that would allow that space to even exist. I nursed my daughter, and I was a part of a nursing community of Black women at the beginning of the pandemic, which was, I learned a lot about women's challenges with working in specific industries and not having access to the proper equipment and locations to nurse. So I just wanted to contribute that.
I think that's
Outstanding. Well,
cool.
Dr. Rob, go ahead, Dr. Mason. Go right ahead.
I just want to say we actually tried to introduce a bill. Introduce into law at the city level a requirement letting all employers of a certain size at least have this a bit available for women to nurse. The data on the advantages of breastfeeding and using the milk of the mother. We've talked about this. I mentioned before about the study that was done at Rush and the ICU and the NICU, having the children fed breast milk versus formula, even though that breast milk didn't come from their mother, it was milk from other women. And people say, well, how would you give some other woman milk from a woman that wasn't the mother? I said, well, you don't have any problem hooking that baby up to a cow that's not even related, any kind of way to that woman, and giving, that baby, and giving that milk from a cow to that baby. But this is at least from the same species, and it contains the right concentrations of the very nutrients that child needs. So I was on VON and November GCI, and women were cursing me out about what do I know about breastfeeding. It was a mess, but I stand by it. And I stand by us creating, even if we had to do it nationally, creating the appropriate legislation that makes it possible for women to breastfeed, to pump and collect milk while they're on their job during their break and what have you, and even to make certain that we make the accommodations comfortable for them to do that. And Congressman, I know I didn't tell you about this earlier. I apologize for not talking about this with you, but I feel very passionate about this. Breastfeeding, breast milk is the singular best milk for an infant. It is tailor-made for that child, and nothing, formula or anything else, in my opinion, will do better. And I'm sure there are moms on this panel that you guys can chime in.
Well, Dr. Robinson, being a youth physician, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would just say in general, yes, I agree. You have, if you're able to provide your child with breast milk, we always think that that's the best. However, we know there are situations where that's not always possible. And so the flip side of that is you always have to just make sure that the child is getting the nutrition that they need. And sometimes you can't provide breast milk for a variety of reasons, and we just got to keep that in mind, because on the flip side there are also a lot of mothers or caregivers that maybe feel guilty if they can't provide breast milk, and kind of take that to heart, and not everybody can. So yes, it's best, and we all promote it as doctors, but just keeping in mind on the other side that sometimes everyone may not be able to do that.
Okay, well, Maya, you, Dr. 100.
Yeah, I love all the information that's coming. I was listening more. I did have some thoughts about, yeah, breast is best. We know that. You're right, Dr. Robinson. There are times when you cannot provide that. I do. I do want to point out something that Dr. Mason originally said, which is, you're giving your baby a lot of antibodies and coverage and health that the system doesn't make initially on its own. So it's like, I always think of things in cartoons or different things. It's like when I used to play Sonic the Hedgehog, right? And I don't know, for those of you that don't play it, Sonic goes and he's going around the track. He's kind of navigating all these things that he has to navigate. And then he gets a turbo boost. Pew, and so it's like helping the immune system get a little pew, the body get a little pew, proteins on pew. So it's the best way to put your baby on pew if you need, if you want to give your baby the best shot at immunity. I mean, there's studies that show their benefits as the baby grows, past the first 2 years. And also, it's a bonding moment for those of us who can, right? There's a bonding moment. There are also inventions for those of us who can't. There are also inventions that, and I try to look one up. There are inventions where you can actually put the formula or other milk in that area, and then you won't get you don't get the stimulation that you would get, which is kind of a release of a hormone called oxytocin. When you look into, when the tissue is activated, but you do get the oxytocin, some form of it, by staring into your baby's eyes. So if you notice, when you tilt a baby a certain way, they'll automatically open their eyes. Dr. Robinson, you can fill us in on that. And just kind of looking into that baby's eyes and just having that bonding moment, whether the milk is coming from the parent's breast, or there are inventions now where you can get it and put like a little vest on, and you can still get that staring into the baby's eyes and stuff like that, right? And your baby's neck, until you clean it, can still smell like milk. Boom. Yes. So if you want to give your baby that pum, breast is best.
Well, Dr. Robinson, right before Dr. Pete takes the mic, why don't you go ahead on and tell us about what it means when you're looking in your child's eyes? Since Dr.
I might get
threw you on blast.
I was like, I might get a little long-winded with that one, but I'll just say in general that as we promote in the hospitals, or whether or not you choose to have a home birth, always right away we want the baby to be skin to skin, getting that bonding in, just getting used to being out in the open environment. So anytime that you are able or have to go skin to skin, bond with your baby, even if you're not breastfeeding, holding skin to skin and feeding skin to skin is always great. But I won't go through all the physiology right now, but maybe later.
is the release of a hormone called oxytocin, and it helps for the bonding mechanism. It happens baby to mother, it happens with loved ones, things like that. But it's a good way to signal safety in a space where baby does not yet understand verbal language, or maybe they do. I've never did a study on that, but it's a good way to signal safety and familiarize yourself with your loved ones, and in this case, your baby.
Just want to
So
add
we're
one
doing
quick thing is that one quick thing, and that is that we have disparities in breastfeeding among women. And Black women are not breastfeeding at the same rates as other women. And I agree that I'm only talking about those women who can. And for the women who can't, they can't. And I don't mean them to feel ostracized, to feel in any way badly about it, because there are conditions that create that is beyond their control. But for the ones that can and do, I think that all I'm trying to say is that we should make it as easy for them. We should have spaces at work for them to do that. I know I remember buying this $450 pump for my daughter, so that she could pump at work and have even more milk when she had to go away for a meeting or something like that. So there are a lot of things, and I want to take my hats off, hand up, put my hand up for all the women who do this, because it is so. I'm not saying negative ones about the ones that don't. I'm just saying I want to congratulate and I want to encourage every woman who can to do it. And what I'm saying is that we need to move any obstructions out of the way in their jobs or anything else in order for them to do it, because it's natural. We have African American, there's a big disparities. African American
Yeah.
women are not breastfeeding as much as everyone else. And when you go across when I was in Ghana, women were breastfeeding on the bus. They were, I mean, out in public. It was no big deal. It was the natural thing. I'm not suggesting that we do that here, but I do want to remove some of that tabooness
Yeah.
around breastfeeding and the uncomfortable situations that some women may feel trying to do that, because that is the natural thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, go ahead.
I wanted to jump in. I'm not going to jump on the breastfeeding bandwagon. I do think it's important. And I remember working with Dr. Mason, and we were trying to get more hospitals to become baby friendly. We were doing a number, and breastfeeding is an obesity prevention initiative. If people didn't realize it, it is an obesity prevention initiative that's been recommended. But I think Dr. Mason's making an even broader point, because what he's talking about is how we moved away from things that used to be the norm, things that we used to do, and people didn't think that was the exception, that this is the way that things were supposed to be. He also talked about the fact that more and more people are getting their meals not in the home, but I've seen people actually going to a fast food restaurant and starting to eat the meal. I've seen a whole family in a car eating their meal on the way home. That's not the way it's supposed to be. I mean, I remember growing up, being at a kitchen table, having dinner with my family. That was it. That was what was expected. I remember my mother and my father were both good cooks. They would cook. There was always food in the house. We've moved away from some of the things. I think his broader point is we've moved away from some things that were the norm, that are no longer the norm, but maybe we should go back to, because it was a healthier way of living and people were less stressed out.
Okay. Val Talley says that is already a law requirement. And Val, we know, but we think that there's some additional barriers in the way that's not allowing that to work out the way it should. So that's what they're sharing on this evening. Dorothy Murphy is here, and she says good evening to everyone. Audrey Jaycox is here, and she says good evening. So is Barbara Ivory. She is here. Keith McDonald is here, and he says interesting conversation. Upindu Parker and Minnie Thompson is here. I want to say thank you guys for stopping by. Mimi Boybray, Albert Bailey Jr., Patrice Rollins, Flo Strong, Megan Gillian, Terry Hamilton, Annie Ryan, and Victor Jackson is here. So is Cecilia Brim. She's here with us just as well. Kathy Jones is here and she's saying thumbs up. Thumbs up to the conversation. Claude Robinson is here and he says, thank you, Congressman Davis, for continuing these sessions. These are simply outstanding for all of us. Donovan Peters is here and he's clapping his hands for the conversation. Kenneth Johnson, Deborah Graham, Christopher Murphy, Victoria Davis, and Xavier McCraven is here just as well, saying great conversation. Arlene Spencer is here. Jamil Mohammed. Hey, Jamil, how are you? Jermaine Nellam, Roger Washington, Patty Ringo, Patricia Fong, and Elaine Phillips is here just as well. Ernice Atkins is here. April Prayer is here. And Carolyn Ridley is here saying thank you for the conversation. Audria Dubin is here, and so is Andrea Lyons Dillon is here with us just as well, saying that this is such a great conversation. We got a quick abundance of questions from a bunch of men who wanted to stay anonymous, but they said, how do they bond with their babies? Can they look into the baby's eyes? How does that happen? Can they bond with their children just as well? And right before you answered that question, we had another abundance of just about 17 people ask the same question at one time. If you are not bonding with your child at birth, due to whatever the reasons may be, it can be work, busy schedule, not having the support systems at home. Do you think that this may lead to the violence that we're seeing in our youth? So let's attack those two questions, and don't everybody attack it at one time. I'm right here waiting.
I'll jump in on the first part. Definitely, there are different types of, like I said, that bonding that a person who's breastfeeding has with a newborn or their baby. That's one type. But that same hormone, that oxytocin, they're different types of spaces, right? Just spending time looking at them. You can feed them with a bottle and look at them. You can, like, there's a lot of stuff. It's just the time definitely put in. I'm a fan of having, even with any relationship, we don't often need the same type of bonding that someone has with another person. It's just important that we're there to bond, right? I do shout out and there to support. I know I don't want to get too far off the topic. Somebody else is going to take the next question, but before I forget, I do want to give out, like, when we talk about types of support, two shout outs right now before we even end, in case I have to have my study session at 8, Nikki. Thank you to the congressman, because at the beginning of this, ability to bond, ability to connect, being accessible with your loved ones, with your constituents. Not many Congress people will sit on a call and say, hey, I have this meeting tomorrow. People here, you please, if you have any questions, get out. Let me know. People are generally, in a great world, all our elected officials are that accessible. The reality is it's not. So thank you, Congress. Not yet. So thank you, Congressman Davis, because when you said, I was like, huh? People aren't that accessible. So thank you for always being open, and always being accessible to the community that you serve. Dr. Mason, I can say in this conversation and in others, thank you for, I doubt you've ever breastfed, but how passionate you're, like, people need space to do that. We have to normalize it and stuff like that. So just shout out right now, just sending good energy and positive and thankfulness for the work that you two and so many other people on here are doing. It. Those are just two things that came out and stood out early in the game here. So yeah. Now, do those not bonding results, contribute to what we're seeing in violence? I'll leave that to one of my esteemed colleagues. Just want to put that there and, set that. Thank you.
Well, go right ahead, Pete.
Yeah, I think, the violence is probably a multitude of various factors that could play a role. Certainly, I think not having a strong family structure, and from the very beginning, not having fathers be present. And that presence, I remember when my newborn I had a preemie, and the ICU the NICU attending told us, he said, look, the mortality rate goes down when they can bond, when you can put the preemie on the dad's chest. So now I'm a doctor, and I was a little trepidatious about, because the baby was like the size of my hand, and I'm like, are you sure it's gonna be safe right here? And so he was like, yeah, not only is safe, but this is gonna improve, and I thought to myself, wow, this is like mind blowing. Because for those of you that need to know, I'm an internist, so I treat adults. Just anybody 16 and below, I get nervous. Okay, but it was interesting to me to hear that the mortality rate of the baby goes down, which means the baby has less opportunity to die when they're on the chest of the dad. And
Oh,
that
wow.
is so cool. And I thought to myself, how many of our babies had a higher mortality rate because dad thought he didn't have a role, or dad thought the conflict with the mom is going to look, we got to be present for our children. I believe that absence has led to a contribution to unnecessary violence. One is because when boys understand that there's a man that they have to be accountable for, it is a whole nother level. Like my reverence for my older physician, Dr. Mason, I remember seeing him. It was like, okay, I have a sense of responsibility that I have to make it because he paved the way for me. My older frat brother, Congressman Davis, I have a responsibility. I have to make it because of that. But these young brothers who feel like they're not connected to anybody and accountable to anything, that has to contribute. Now, do I have the randomized controlled trials to prove it? No, I don't. But I feel like that my anecdotal life experience said that I am where I am because I was looking up to somebody, and I felt like if I messed up, I would disappoint those people. And of course, I messed up, but I always felt like there was an
Not
opportunity.
that bad.
I did okay, right? Of course, my brother Joe, I always felt inspired by him.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a quick story. It's actually a Dr. Whitaker story. It's interesting. He told us at a program, he was getting ready to present, and the AMA was doing a program, and Dr. Mason happened to be in the room. And Dr. Whitaker's mother was a nurse at Michael Reese Hospital, and she got him a job at the old Michael Reese Hospital. Dr. Whitaker was a doorman at, at Michael Reese Hospital. And he said that when he worked there, he used to see this young African American resident coming in. That was Dr. Terry Mason. That's how these stories. That's how these stories connect. We meet each other through different ways, and that was part of the inspiration of him to say, "Yeah, I could be like that guy there, that's walking through, this young resident there." So that we have a lot of these stories, and sometimes people don't realize that. But it also speaks to this idea of bonding in general. Everybody needs to be bonded with somebody and feel they have relationships with somebody and have a posse or somebody that they can go to when they have to talk, or they need some help. So it's not just infants. All of us need that moving forward, and some of us never get that, and that may be a contributor to what you see in some of these young people. They're not getting it. They may get it in the gang, but that's the worst place to get it. They may get some positive reinforcement about who they are and what they should do, but they're not getting it in home, and they're not getting it anywhere else. And that would contribute to some of the behaviors we see.
I would just quickly add to what you guys, because I agree with both of you. But one of the things that we're missing in that bonding, and that I'm so glad you brought that out about the bonding. And that bonding, when I grew up in Inglewood, was with the neighborhood. It wasn't just my house. It wasn't just the next door. It was the whole neighborhood. Everybody knew your name. Everybody knew your mama, your daddy. You knew their cousins, their uncles, their aunts, their everybody. When their car, they even knew their car when they came over. And the thing that's missing is that we were parented not just by our biological nuclear parents, but we were parented by an entire community,
a village.
a village, yes. And it was safe, and it was safe because you knew that no matter what you did, whether it was good or it wasn't good, that people were going to find out. And it wasn't a secret they were going to find out. And they'd look at you, ain't you so-and-so's boy? Come up here, boy. Let me talk to you for a second. No, I'm being serious. I'm being very serious. And what happened is out in the grocery stores, I mean, the other thing gets to another conversation about our businesses and that sort of stuff. But we had businesses in our community. And many of us, like me, I worked in those grocery stores. I did everything, and I even learned how to be a butcher in the grocery store. I mean, I could cut a whole half a cow down. I needed my buddy, the football player, to help move it around for me, but I could do it and cut any kind of steak you wanted. But I'm just saying that bonding that was created by that interaction with everybody. I mean, it was like I had 20 parents, because if any of them saw me do something I wasn't supposed to be doing, every last one of them were deputized to be my parent and handle that situation whatever way it needed to be handled. And they did. And then they would tell your mother that or father. So, I mean, that village is gone. And we've got, and I'll say this by saying, I think we may have close to 2 generations of children that have never been properly parented.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because just walking over from voting earlier this evening, one of my colleagues and I were chatting, and he mentioned the fact that he had gone into a store near where he lives here in DC, and a group of kids came in and they just kind of went shopping and picked up whatever they wanted and walked out with it. And there were security people there. And he says he felt compelled to go and talk to the manager and ask them, why didn't they do something? And he said that the people told him that they had just taken sort of a hands off because one of their employees had been stabbed in the neck by a kid that he tried to intervene with. And he said they just had taken the position that they just write off those items or as pilferage and just kind of half act like they were looking the other way. And then he says he went to the principal of the school along with the store manager to try and see if there were things that maybe the school could try and do relative to behavior. And of course, I experienced a bit of it because when I'm in Chicago, I generally stop at this little store and purchase a newspaper every day. And there are kids there on their way to school, and they're pretty much doing the same thing. And they've got 2 employees that they have there just to kind of try to watch the kids and do whatever they can do. And so we ended up talking about parenting and how effective or non-effective in some environments is parenting. And if it's not present, how do we get it started? I was just looking at what is being proposed for our 2024 Health and Human Services budget, $144 billion in discretionary funding and $1.7 trillion in mandatory funding. And the first things listed is behavior healthcare and the idea of transforming. I mean, that's the first item. And of course, mental health is a big piece of the action in terms of a recognition that in order to transform some of what we are experiencing, that a lot of attention's got to be given to what we call mental health. And I noticed on television today, of course, the news was all about the woman who went up to the school and killed the teachers and the children. And so behavior health is a great big piece of what we need to figure out more effective ways of dealing with. And I don't know how we do that unless we put in place an awful lot of procedural active things that take place beyond talking about them. I'm saying talking about them is one thing, but putting them in place and doing it, I think, becomes the big challenge. And of course, talking is good because that's the first step. And that's what talking kind of does, is puts it out on the table. Then you make the other decisions in relationship to what is taking place. It's kind of frightening, quite frankly, and scary.
Well, Philip Jackson is here and he says, hey to everyone. Val Talley says, I agree wholeheartedly. Kim Jackson is here. She says, good evening, everybody. Love it. Yes, the dads matter. She also says, I agree about the 2 generations of missed parenting. She says she's agreed. An abundance of guys started sending Dr. Pete fist bumps and thumbs up when he mentioned the importance of a dad. And of course, I have to protect, but I have to share our message from our group over at the Core Center who is watching in that room that says, yes, Pete. And they gave a ton of thumbs up. It's all about the chest. So whatever that means, it's all about the chest. The Core Center is adamant about being here on Mondays, but they are working. Who knows that the people at the Core Center are working? They just have this big monitor and they're watching it as they are walking up and down the hallways. Barbara, right. Barbara Ivory says, today's parenting skills are so different. Our society has turned a blind eye on the bad behavior of their children. Wow. Well,
yeah, one of the things that I think sometimes people don't.
Breastfeeding is really important. So, Dr. Mason, I know you talk about. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was going to say that, that we have a lot of people, just because you have the ability to have children doesn't mean that you're going to be a good parent. I mean, that's one thing that people need to understand. It takes a certain amount of patience, and it takes a certain amount of life skills to actually be a parent. We have a lot of young people, children, teenagers that are parents. They have no parenting skills. They're not capable of being parents. And so it's just one problem leading to another problem after another problem. Some of it is behavioral, but we do have a number of people that have brought kids into this world that were not prepared to and not even ready to have kids. And now they have kids and they got to figure it out. They're figuring this out on the fly, on the run. Over time, they may become good parents, but that's something that's very difficult to do.
I wanted to share a story. I saw a young lady, and she had a baby with her, and so we took care of whatever health problems she was having, and then I said, like the father in me said, well, where's the dad? Like, do you have a relationship with the dad? And she looked and said, he's not a good person. And I said, okay, now that makes sense. So she's making a calculated decision. I don't want to be involved with him, even though I know it's probably best for the baby, but he's not a good person. And if he hurts me, he ultimately hurts the baby. And so I just thought to myself, wow, this kid is starting off with so many challenges. It doesn't mean that that's it for her, but it's just, it's just another burden for her. And, I tried to encourage her, look, whatever you want to do in life, you can do it. You just got to get your support team around you. And I just thought, it's just, and so that sort of starts this cycle. And God, it was a little baby boy too, and so I just was thinking, it's tough. It's tough. It's tough. And so, but also I think the interaction, I think it wasn't on accident that she got me for a physician, and so that I can have just a little extra conversation to encourage her that, look, you can do it. I don't care what the situation is, that the God of the universe can do anything. And I told her that. So I know this ain't church, but the pastor has spoken. I know Pastor James Miller ain't here today, so I'm gonna take over for him.
Well, I saw him at church on Sunday. I happened to have visited his church
Very good.
on Sunday, and he was right there in his deacon seat where he sits.
I wanted to add.
I'm sorry.
Oh, God, sorry, Dr. Mason.
No, go, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, just thinking, going back to some of the earlier conversation around Black women, Black families participating in breastfeeding. I wanted to just have the panel maybe think through some resources we could offer to the audience, because I gave birth back in 2020, which feels forever ago. But one of the things that I did not have was I had to be very proactive and intentional about finding a community of other Black breastfeeding mothers. And what that looked like, it increased my education on what to expect, how to navigate the discomfort of adjusting your life around feeding your kid. But what it also explained and helped me understand was that there are hubs of people who are willing to donate breast milk if for mothers who have the desire to provide their kids with breast milk but are not physically able. There are resources, and I think one thing that we could do is empower the community to just be able to try everything before giving up, or to just explore all of their resources around them if breastfeeding is important to them, learning about what it means to receive donor milk, understanding what processes the donor milk has to go through before it's delivered to another mother, and just really helping folks find community. I was one of the only people in my life at the time breastfeeding, aside from Reverend Hatch Jr.'s wife, who had her baby right before me. And she was one of my largest resources around what to do when this happens, what to do when that happens after I left the hospital. So if there's any way the doctors on the panel or anyone can pop in the chat and share some of those resources with the community, I think it's important for people to know where to go if I want to do this, but I am not able. I think that would be helpful.
It's interesting, these people's names and all that pop up. The Hatches I saw twice on Sunday. Hatch Senior and Hatch Junior.
You know, I think the whole notion of this, when I said about not being parented, um, parenting was beyond your mom, your biological mom, and your biological father. Parenting for me means you grow up in a community, a real community, where you're not just your parents' biological son, you're your neighborhood's biological son. And all of them, that symphony of support that came from those people were the things that made life for me. Sometimes, it was, you're like, oh my God, they're gonna tell this, tell that, but I'm glad they did, because that was about correction. And that's not what we're getting right now. And I have to say, at another time, we have to talk about the purposeful social disconstruction of the Black family, because there's no way that we get around this conversation without being honest with history in terms of the housing policies, everything from redlining to everything else. These are all part of the social disconstruction of the Black family. I'll leave you with a quick anecdote. I was growing up, one of the family members on welfare and living in the projects, and we had to make sure that anytime the caseworker was going to come for it, I had to make it look like my uncle wasn't there. So he had to take all the clothes out, had to take the phone out, had to do all of that stuff to do that, because of the rules that were in play at that time. So I'm just saying that we need to look at, Congressman, what legal and what kind of laws and policy decisions have encroached upon our ability to have the community that we're talking about. So, and I don't mean that you have to answer that right now, but there are some things that we do need to look at, because we have lost our ability to have the community. I lived in a community with practically all Black people on it. The first job I got was given to me by a couple from Meridian, Mississippi, in a grocery store, and cleaning a laundromat. So there's a lot that lessons that I learned that had nothing to do with what was going on necessarily at my individual house, but because of this experience I had collectively. To Maya's point, that tribe was so helpful for me.
That debate will start seriously next week when we have a hearing on temporary assistance for needy families, something called TANF.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of anticipate what the discussion will entail.
I just want to make sure before we finish out from the beginning of about the question, and make sure that we passed on that, yes, it's not just about breastfeeding. Skin to skin for mothers, fathers is all beneficial and important. It gives benefits both to the baby and the parents as far as stress management, feeling confident, those things later on in life. So even if you weren't there within the first hour after birth, or even the first week, that you still can form those bonds and attachments later on. So just wanted to put that out there. Even if you weren't there, if your baby was in the ICU or you were in the ICU, there's still time for bonding long term, and it still provides benefits. Just wanted to make sure we ended on.
Well, thanks for sharing that, because you have an abundance of men who are clapping hands and bumping fists. I believe Pete started that. And between the congressman and Dr. Mason, they have woke up Pastor Phil Jackson and Pastor Spiller, because they are all sending the word truth. Here, Pastor Ackery Pastor Ackery, put it in the chat. Don't text my phone. Put it in the chat. You all then sparked a nerve in him just as well. Linda Johnson says, yep, they did. Natasha Hall says, I am glad you addressed that, Dr. Mason. And Linda Johnson also says, let's not forget that some parents use drugs up to 8 months or more, and use drugs up to 8 months of more and not use in the last month so that the baby will not test positive for drugs. I think this plays a big part in the child's behavior. Thank you, Linda, for sharing that. Val Talley says, I am so glad you brought this up, Congressman. It was a private school, and less than 4% of these attacks occur in private schools. Mental health is a big problem post COVID. Thank you so much for sharing that just as well. Well, I know you guys hate to hear me say this. You hate it, you hate it, you hate it. And I know, but it is our time. So right before we go around this panel and begin to share our Until Next Mondays, just want to remind you that we are approaching April, and April is a great month for a number of different things, just a number of different things. One, in April, it is Child Abuse Awareness Month. Two, in April, it is also Minority Health Month. And then we will be sharing something that they call it for a week, but we're just going to celebrate it the whole month. And that's our Maternal Health Month. So I want to remind you guys to meet us on April 22nd at Bill Chicago Inc. at 5100 West on Harrison on that Saturday from 10 to 3:30 as we continue this conversation on a more robust level for you to become a part. And all are invited out to meet our robust guests that will be there with us at that time, sharing and having these conversations and these breakout sessions where we will come up with some great solutions for what we're going to be talking about at that time. So Sylvia, Dr. Robinson, you're Until Next Monday. What would you like to leave everybody with until next Monday?
So until next Monday, I would like everybody to remain open, not necessarily have your mind changed or to change your opinion, but to consider other viewpoints. So that's what I always try to do, and I hope everyone will do the same. Have a good week.
Outstanding. Dr. Douglas Graham, you're Until Next Monday.
So, Nikki, you always kind of comment about my being out in the sun. I live in a very small community. In the last 2 weeks, 4 of my neighbors have had COVID. None of them went to the hospital, but they are all relatively sick and had to isolate for quite a while. So I'm going to plead with you. If you haven't been vaccinated, get vaccinated. If you haven't been boosted, get boosted. Only 16% of the American population have had all 4 of the COVID virus shots. It's our best defense. You don't want to get it. You don't want to become a long-termer.
Thank you so much, Doug, for sharing that. And I usually remind everybody to, if you want to be trendy, to get the trend and have the injection. And I wanted to remind people of that just as well. So thank you for doing that. We actually had one of our local hospitals here have to shut down and stop visiting on last week because their COVID numbers had gotten so high. So COVID is still here. It's still real. If you are in a place where you don't feel like you've achieved herd immunity, please wear your mask. I continue to wear my mask anyway because it's just trendy for me. I'm going to keep the mask on because I don't want anything. So just, if you don't feel comfortable, make sure you wear it. And I'm all vaccinated up, but you just got to be safe. Dr. Maya Green, you're Until Next Monday. Come on, Dr. 100.
All right. Until next Monday, I want to just dovetail off the symphony of support, that Dr. Mason. I love that. I love the different ways it happens in our community. I love that this is one of the ways. Couch Conversations, is one of the ways that we offer a symphony of support. Everybody providing support for our community from their perspective ways. I love that. And I just want to send good energy out to everybody listening and hope you continue to find your symphony of support. See you next Monday.
Outstanding. Joe Harrington, you're Until Next Monday. You're muted, Joe.
I've unmuted. Yeah, I've got 2. They came to me as I was listening to the conversation. One is an Akan word from the Akansa tribe in Ghana, Sankofa, and it loosely translates to go back and get it. It's also said it is not taboo to go back for what you forgot or left behind. So we can learn from the past and we can bring it into the future. The other thing that I thought about, and it really was on my heart, particularly when I saw the devastation in Mississippi, the tornadoes that happened, and there were people down there that were dirt poor, that didn't have anything. Now they have less than what they had beforehand. And I was reminded of Maya Angelou's Still I Rise. So I just want to read the first stanza. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, we'll rise.
All right. Dr. Pete, you're until next Monday.
Just that I'm encouraged by my colleagues. You guys have really inspired me. One, to continue to build on that symphony of support. Most of my life, I got here because somebody put their arms around me and stood in front of me and stood in back of me and on side of me. And so we got to be that for this generation, even when they don't know that they need that, right? They don't even know what they don't need. And so, or what they do need, I should say. And so we got to be there for them, advocate for them. And Congressman, if there's one thing I would share or ask the Secretary of Health is to some of the COVID funds that people believe is not necessary. I would say we haven't seen the fallout from what happened in those 2 years, the amount of screenings that we missed, the amount of cancer diagnosis that went from stage 1 to stage 3. And so I would argue that we are going to see an onslaught of cardiovascular cancer, chronic lung disease that we have never seen before. And so some of those funds will need to be used to get ahead of that thing. Now, what does that look like in real terms? I mean, we can put committees together to talk about that, but I would argue that's going to be a big issue.
All right. Thank you so much. Miss Newkirk, you're until next Monday.
Yes. Until next Monday, and in honor of, sorry, that's my daughter. In honor of Social Work Month, I just want to remind everyone to prioritize self-care. Find some time to pour into yourself and to take care of yourself. I heard a great quote about mental health being hygienic, meaning you need to do it as often as you brush your teeth. So I'd love for, to just charge everyone with pouring into their own cup a little bit this month.
All right. Let her say hi. She wants to say hi. Let her say hi.
Say hi, Taylor.
Hi, Taylor.
Hi.
Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Dr. Mason, you're until next Monday.
Well, I've got a Taylor as a granddaughter, so that's a wonderful thing. I just want to say thank you to the Congressman, to you, Nikki. This has been a great conversation. I think we need to follow up on it even more. I'm not sure what it means, but I think that we've started something that we've got to continue. And I just want to remember that perhaps the way where we start is in our own families. We probably got some room in our own families to do some of this work. So I would implore us to start there and for all of us to do what you can, where you can. Get in where you fit in and do the best you can with what you got, where you are.
All right. Outstanding. Outstanding. Joe Harrington, Pastor Phil Jackson says, hey to Joe. And Kimberly Goodrum, thank you for sharing the book in the public chat that you would like people to look into. I'll leave that there so people can actually look into that. As always, we want to thank you guys for being here with us on the Monday. So Congressman Davis, take us home.
Well, there are some people that you don't want to know things because if they do, they will tell it. I understand that Jack Lynch is going to be retiring pretty soon from the gift of hope. And I want to take a moment to just simply congratulate him on an outstanding career. The gift of hope, for those who don't know, is one of the most outstanding organ transplantation organization in the United States of America. And I've had the good fortune to work with them for many, many, many years. And Jack's work there just happened to have been outstanding. And also, Jack and I had a mutual friend, a fellow who helped Jack go to college and all that kind of stuff, Dr. Raymond Pierce, who was my dentist as well as my friend. but we became even friendlier when he let me know that he knew Jack and that he and Jack had known each other for a long period of time. So, Jack, I just simply congratulate you for the outstanding job that you have done with the gift of hope. I mean, I personally know any number of individuals who have received the referrals, the counseling, the hand holding, the transplantation information that they needed to have. They've been able to receive an organ or they've been able to give an organ. And good luck as you transition. The only other thing I'll say is that, 1 in 4 adults in the United States had a mental illness. 1 in 4. And 46 million Americans had a substance use disorder in the past year.
Mm.
And those are two great big areas of tremendous need. And of course, we'll be looking to see how our country attempts to deal with that. The reality is that those are just as much problem areas as any other areas that we will deal with. And so maybe I'll hear tomorrow what the secretary and his people have proposed for those, because those are great big factors. I always say that where there is life, there is hope, and where there is hope, there is possibility. And when possibilities are dealt with, not only can we do what Dr. Whitaker and his team have done with Zing, but we can just keep on zinging. So let me thank all of you for zinging with us this afternoon, this early evening. Hopefully, we'll see you all next week. And after next Tuesday, I trust that we will be in better hands in terms of the leadership of our city. And until then, thank you so much for joining with us on this day. Have a wonderful night, and we hope to see you next week. All right.
Good night.
Okay, so long.